Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the open forum for the election for the chief of LSPD. Before you are your three candidates. It's going to be Buck Manson, Spencer Avery, and Callum Smithy.
Let's go.
All three,
Smithy.
all three of which are going to be running and participating in this open forum debate. The format is going to be that each candidate will be able to provide an opening statement, say what they are about in their running campaign, and then afterwards we will open up the floor. I will ask people to put their hands up, in which case I will call you, and you can either pose a question to a specific candidate or a open topic question for all the candidates to discuss. If you do a specific question to a candidate, the other candidates are given an option to respond to their answer as well. So, that being said, if just keep in mind that you are expected to remain respectful during the entirety of this event. Otherwise, you may be removed from the building. We do hope that this is going to be a fair and respectable debate so we can have an open election where the public may decide who will be the next chief. That being said, I'm going to pass it up to Buck Manson. Go ahead if you want to give your opening statements.
Yeah, sure. Honestly, what I'm here and I'm all about is diversifying the police department. I really want to move us away from just the monotony of being robot cops, I guess is the easiest way to put it, and responding to calls. I really want to make us all a lot more personable, more approachable, and more understanding and willing to listen
Shift
and
play
hear
back
things
on two.
out, as well as to provide other opportunities for not just the department,
639
but
back on
the
two.
civilians as well.
All right, beautifully said. Next up, Spencer Avery, if you can give your opening statement.
Forgot to turn off my
Sure.
radio.
As you've seen, I'm sure, because all of us have been posting on Twitter and our billboards and such, my campaign stands on three main points being transparency, community, and education. Starting with education, I feel like our officers just need more commitment from us as their command and as their leadership, more commitment to their education and growing them as police officers. And I am committed to helping each and every officer find their footing and feel confident every day in what they're doing. Second, being community. I've already been involved a lot in reaching back out and trying to build connections back with civilians. Um, and I plan to continue doing that in every way possible. Uh, and then the third being transparency. There's a lot of distrust between officers and command with other command, and things like that. And my goal is to help bridge those gaps by being as transparent as possible about decisions that are made in the police department. That's kind of how I see it. As everybody just needs to trust each other a little more on all sides. So I'm hoping that we can make that happen.
Couldn't agree more. Next up, Callum Smithy, if you want to give your opening statement.
I wish to engage with the public and reinforce Graves Grace, with old bridges being rebuilt to support officers and the general public. Step one is to be kinder to each other, no matter what. Also, it's not just about sending people to jail, it's about re education and to assist them after they get released from jail, being if they're fine and need help with anything, or if they have any mental health issues, to then send them to the right people to assist them, so we're not just dumping them and shumping them out of the way. My campaign is for community commitment, communication, taking action, and general results to get sorted. So every complaint will be dealt with swiftly and investigated, and no bias will be taken.
Does that conclude your opening statement?
It does, sir.
All right, perfect. So standing before you, as I said previously, are going to be your three candidates for chief of LSPD. And now we will open up to questions from the public. If anybody wants to go ahead, raise your hand. I can call you out. Otherwise, I will throw out some prepared questions.
You may want to do your prepared ones. It looks like we have some more people coming in.
Sure thing. Well, we got one already in the back. What's your name, sir?
My name is Tabo San Diego.
All right, Mr. San Diego. What would be your question?
My first question is to Mr. Buck Manson, was it? I think.
Yes, sir.
Um, I would say that I'm a not experienced nor good nor a lot. I've done a lot of crime, and I barely see you nor remember you. Why is that? What? Why? Like I don't get it. I've seen
Well, I
her
mean,
and
it could
Smithy a
just
lot.
come down to a matter of, the differences when I'm actually patrolling versus when you're doing your daily business about in the city.
Mhm.
I mean, I try to not leave too many lasting impressions if I don't have to. I mean, I would absolutely love for people to remember me in a positive light, but unfortunately, given the circumstances of our job, it's not always the most applicable way to meet people.
Can I just go down the line?
Typically, you have one question to ask. Usually, all the candidates, unless you have a specific one. Is that
was
it?
it. I have a
Okay.
lot. I have like a couple more. I have one for each.
Okay. Let's see if anybody else
Okay.
has anything before we just start rapid firing you. Does anybody who do we have for the next question? I guess you can go again, Mr. San Diego.
All right. Um, Avery, right?
Yes, sir.
Um, when I was in prison, you and I'm gonna call him out here because why not? Ben Lewis, wherever he is, don't know where, but when I was in prison, y'all treated me like an animal. I get it, in prison, yeah, but that's not always good. And when I was in there, I heard a lot of things about certain things, and y'all may have been, the bad apples that fell off the tree, but as of now, you seem like two good apples, the both of you. What changed?
I'm not sure what you're referring to as far as treating you as an animal. I know that there was one time in prison where you attempted to stab an officer. I was called in for backup. I hardcuffed you because you would not stop running around. So I was advised to keep you in cuffs until they were done searching the premises, and then we let you out after, which was pretty standard protocol for that sort of incident at the time. So I personally never had any vendettas against you. I still don't. Um,
I just want to know what changed about you. I wasn't even talking about that, but it's clear you know what I'm talking about. That's enough said for me.
and no, I mean, I'm aware of the situation of the only one of the only times I interacted with you when you were in prison. But I don't know. Nothing has really changed. I've continued to do my job exactly the way that I always have, and I'll continue to keep doing it the way that I've been doing it.
Okay, I respect it. Um, Smithy,
Yes, Tubbo.
you have always been a rule for the books, and you don't really let anything slide. Uh, and nobody really likes you for some reason. But not. I'm not saying everybody, but a lot of people don't like you. But it's because you are strict for the books. And every time I like call you or whatever, you're always doing paperwork. Um, After all of this, after all the shit that you've done for this force, why do you want to be chief?
I can see a lot of improvements to be done between community and the police, especially like yourself when you were in the jail. I was visiting you every day, checking up on you, make sure you had food, make sure you didn't need anything from the mental health side or anything. Just literally reaching out and talking with people and finding out what they need and if there's anything we can do to help them. That's my main goal, is to assist the public, as we are state employees employed to serve and protect not only just their lives but their mental health and their well-being.
Okay, thank y'all.
All right, awesome, great questions. Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions? for the time being. Feel free to raise your hand at any point if you have any questions that you'd like to bring forward to the candidates. They could be hard pressing issues, etc. Whether it be candidate related or if you just want to know their stance on certain topics. For now, I'll go ahead and submit one of the prepared questions. As a former chief of the San Andreas Police Department and entering that position, I know what it feels like. Uh, in terms of entering the position, what would you say? So we'll pass through the candidates, going from left to right, starting with Manson. What do you think your biggest hurdle is going to be your first week of taking office?
I think my biggest hurdle is really going to be trying to show people that I'm not what I used to be, as I wasn't exactly the most well received person in the past, and I want to change, and I have changed, and I'm willing to change more if needed. And the biggest thing that's going to be a hurdle for me is just trying to get past that reputation.
Okay. Avery?
As current interim chief, the biggest hurdle that I've noticed so far is the discrepancy in the way that people are treated, civilians and officers alike. There's been a lot of just, I guess, back and forth and discrepancies as far as like certain people doing certain things and in my opinion, being treated differently than another officer would, maybe doing the same thing. And I've seen the same thing for civilians, and every time that I've been able to, I've corrected it. And I hope to continue to be able to do that until the police force can get to a point where we are one united and, you know, looking out for each other the way we should be.
Beautifully said.
Good.
And Smithy?
I think the biggest hurdle we're going to have if I was chief was to integrate where we serve the public, we assist with the public, not just to arrest them. Generally, just assisting with any general needs they may have, like complaints. They don't just get brushed under the carpet and laughed at, they get dealt with.
Awesome. Beautiful. For those of you that just entered the room, just so you're aware, if anybody would like to bring a question or a topic for discussion, please just feel free to raise your hand. Otherwise, I will just keep referencing the existing questions. Obviously, this is your chance to speak up and get information out of the candidates. So, by all means, participation is very well encouraged. Okay. Next prepared question. It has long been known that the judicial system in the state has been suffering and has not exactly been the best part of the state. Do you have any plans, and what is your position on the current state of the judicial system? We're going to do the opposite this time. Smithy first.
Yes, I have a plan for that was also brought in by Boss when he was chief of police, but then stopped, where I would get officers trained with the DA to specialise with bench trials, court cases, so they'll be able to know all the facts and everything to deal with the suspect and the court case for the state police in all departments if there's no one around.
Okay. Absolutely. Avery, if you want to weigh in.
Yeah. So I have a lot of opinions about the current judicial system, and I want it to be more accessible to civilians. I think right now there's a lot of struggle to get trials and things set. I currently am setting up a meeting with one of the judges to discuss things like that and concerns that they have for us. I think the best thing we can do here is keep open communication. Know that we're all on the same side and we're all trying to make it better. I feel like a lot of people tend to point fingers and, you know, say, oh, well, the judges aren't around. Oh, the lawyers aren't around. Oh, well, you know, X, Y, Z, and the other. And I think if we all work together rather than blaming, we'll get a lot farther.
Beautifully said. All right. Manson?
Yeah, I want to agree. I think the current judicial system that we have currently is flawed in many ways, but it is on an upward trend. We have seen a lot more bench trials and other sorts of trials that have come to light recently, and it has been enlightening to see just where we stand as a police department. I think the way that we necessarily need to go about it, while we should have specialized officers for handling the majority, I think it's also a good thing to touch a small foundation with every cadet that we take in and every officer, and make sure that every officer is capable of, you know, properly going about the judicial system and making sure that everybody's rights are kept intact.
Okay, perfect. We'll pass it on to Frank. Frank, go ahead and ask your question.
Hi. We all know that even after becoming an officer, that more training is always going to be required for for promotions, for getting new, getting the SWAT and everything like that. Do any of you have any objections to potentially mandate more training outside of the police force in more of a community outreach position? I probably fucked that up. My bad.
All right, you can start ahead. Go ahead, Manson.
From a community outreach perspective, I really want to look into giving officers a little more responsibility and creating an entire, I guess I don't want to call it a division, but a group of officers that want to dedicate themselves towards community outreach and setting up events to foster good relations with the community. And I think that that's a good thing to touch on, because that's a great thing that we need to be training people on, is how to make sure that we're not just being assholes constantly, for lack of a better term. And I think that that'll come with other training as well. I want to work with not just EMS, but the judicial system on getting some field training or just some kind of training outside the police department when it comes to other things such as first aid and the judicial system. And then maybe working with, community, high profile community members for community outreach on things we can do better and maybe how to improve future events.
Okay. Avery?
I definitely agree that community outreach needs to be one of our top priorities right now. I have been involved a little bit in some of the planning of hopefully upcoming events that'll get set up, but in the meantime, there's also other things in the works that I'm hoping we can make happen. As far as I know, there's been already one that has gone through as for community service type stuff, or driving practice or something like, or classes, I believe, which is a good way for us to connect with the community. Looking for ways that other officers that maybe don't have that particular skill set to get involved on that end, and see what we can do to make sure that we can put something together that every officer can be involved in, regardless of skill set.
Awesome. Next up, Smithy.
I'm all for community relations. There is an event next month that is planned that I know of. I also want to try and reach out to the local gangs to speak to the leaders and any local community leader that may want to reach out and form a team within that community to sit down and have a talk and find out what any issues are, any problems are that they may have within the police force or in their community that they need help with.
Okay, awesome. If nobody has any questions, I'll go back to the prepared. In the state of San Andreas, or when you're assuming one of these positions, obviously there's always things that you need to address that you guys are talking about in terms of bettering or fixing things. But one of the most exciting things is going to be starting new programs or new initiatives. That being said, I know me as commissioner, I've started the Graves Grace campaign and things of that nature. Do you have any sort of campaign or initiative that you wanted to do that is new rather than repairing something that is already pre-existing. I'll start this one off with Avery.
As far as myself, I've been focused a lot currently on trying to repair what we do have and building that strong foundation. I do have other ideas and things in the works. I've reached out to Frank regarding a possible new certification to more closely work with EMS so we can provide better first aid for civilians, and be more involved and benefit, more of a benefit to EMS, as they do so much for us. I'd love to give back to them. And I've been overseeing a sort of combination between our MCD and our SRT to get a little bit more tactical with certain aspects of our operations, including involving canines with that as well. So there's a lot of new things in the works. It's just lots of SOP writing, lots of changes coming. But yes, I have been involved quite a bit with getting some new stuff rolling for us.
All right, and Smithy.
Like I said previously, I want to engage with the local gangs, MCs, and community leaders to build a team up to discuss a lot of issues that we have around the state. Also, I have spoken to Frank as well about possibly having a specialist dedicated team where it's an officer and a specialist EMT that deals with people that have mental health issues that can respond to them incidences and assist them when required on a low key, so it doesn't freak them out so much. There's a lot of community building that needs to be done, not just out on the streets, but also in the jails and with mental health, as I know a lot of people have had this issue recently. And I just want to help everyone that I can, just make their life a little bit easier.
I think we could all agree with that. Manson.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I want to do, while it might not be entirely new, I want to do a new take on it. Is something that we've done in the past as a department when it comes to cadets. Is I want to work with Mount Zona on getting them to do some volunteer time as EMS before they become fully certified officers within the state. Simply because sometimes officers take EMS for granted and kind of treat them poorly. And I think that that's just wrong, and that we kind of need to spend a little time in their shoes. And on top of that, I also want to have this program where we focus a lot on community events and fostering good relations with the community, as I mentioned in a previous question, with the section of, or the group of officers that I want to dedicate to PR in particular.
Awesome. As there's still no questions, I'll keep going. Oh, never mind. Here we go. I see two here. Go ahead, Pinky.
So this one's for everyone. What is your stance on something like Academy and keeping officers trained on new and old practices, so to hopefully prevent incidents of mess ups and angering the community?
Start
Whoever wants
that
to go
one.
first.
Yeah, Manson.
I have always been of the belief that academies work some of the time. They don't always work 100% because not everybody learns in the same way. I think that they're a good training tool as an introductory, but when it comes down to in-depth topics such as the intricacies of dealing with difficult suspects or trying to navigate tricky situations where, we're trying to make sure we're not doing anything that might put people in harm's way, I find that one-on-one training is best. I think that when it comes to retraining of old topics, one-on-one is also the best there. But when it comes to like big academy classes, a lot of the times the major points and the real hard hitting facts of why we train people just gets lost in translation. It's not a bad idea. It just doesn't always work for everyone.
Okay. Let's do Smithy next.
And welcome everybody.
With the academy, I know some people train. I've had many cadets in my time. Some train where they're visual learners, so they have to do it themselves. Others can just see it on paperwork and they get it that way. But I feel like academy would be beneficial in some ways, but one-to-one training is the best. You can literally get them at ease, so because they're nervous on the job anyway when they start as a cadet. You can ease them into the community. Anything new that comes in, I do feel we should do like a 10 to a class, so we can literally dedicate. So we've got 10 officers that are trained in that new skill. So we're not just putting one officer out on the streets that has that one skill.
For those who've just
Okay.
joined us, we are
Then Avery.
at a press conference for the new chief
I
of police.
personally have seen, or I guess, well, experienced full-on straight academy, and I've been an FTO for sponsorship programs, and I've seen how both have their benefits and their disadvantages. I personally think the best solution is some sort of combination of both. I think people still need that classroom instruction where they learn just the basics before they ever leave the police or the station. But I also think that one-on-one teaching is very beneficial. There was a lot of officers, senior officers and corporals that were
Excuse me, mate.
running classes for very specific topics, like traffic stops and felony traffic stops and things of that nature. When I was a cadet and even deputy, 'cause I was originally a PCSO deputy. So through my cadet, deputy, and deputy first class phase, I guess, is when those were happening quite frequently, and I would love to see those pop back up because they were incredibly informative and incredibly helpful to my personal learning and growth as an officer.
Beautifully said.
Sorry, I apologize for that.
No worries. Deidre Duke, did you still have your question?
Yes, I do.
Go ahead.
So there are a number of kind of non-lethal weapons or means to subdue a criminal, which is great. Especially when lethal force is unwarranted. But I have, over the months, I have noticed an attitude among officers that non-lethal weapons are harmless or do not cause injury or have any risk involved with them. And because of that, oftentimes officers will use them against fellow officers, or they will use them against detainees when they have already been detained, or when they are complying. And they seem to think it's not an issue because they aren't going to kill them, right? So I was just wondering, this is a question for all of you. Do you think that this is currently a problem? And if so, what ideas or things do you think can kind of correct this sort of attitude?
We'll start off with Avery.
I know what you're talking about. I think we've all heard you say him about a million times to us. Tasers aren't toys. I think I personally haven't witnessed it happen, I guess, too often to civilians, and when I have, I've corrected it. I guess towards each other, we're definitely a little more, I guess, rough towards each other as officers. We have a very strong bond, regardless of the fractures that we do currently have, and sometimes our, I guess, playfulness or our camaraderie goes a little too far in the sense that we shouldn't be doing those sorts of things to each other. And I definitely see your point, and it is a valid point of, regardless of it being non-lethal force, we still shouldn't be treating it in that sense. So I definitely see where you're coming from for that.
Okay, Manson.
Yeah, I think that there is a small stigma behind it right now, where there are some degrees that us officers will go through when we're just at the end of a shift trying to blow off steam with each other that gets a little out of hand. I think that a lot of the times, like Avery was said, there's always the phrase that tasers aren't toys, because they're not. And that's a big issue that's been had, and that's been in the department for as long as I can remember. And that's one of the things where I can't say I'm innocent of it, but at the same time I can't say I agree with it because it's dangerous. It is. And sometimes we just absentmindedly do things that others around us are doing, and it's not a good look, and I think it needs to stop. And the first step with that is to start from the top and work its way down and make sure that we, as responsible officers and command members, are not doing it, to make sure that our other officers see that it's something that we should be stopping. And as far as when it comes to detainees and complying individuals, I think it's abhorrent that people would resort to such measures and, such as tasing or do any other kind of non-lethal force to anyone who's complying. It's quite frankly unacceptable and shouldn't be tolerated and should be corrected almost immediately, if not immediately.
Okay, Smithy.
I've seen on hand both civilians, excuse me, and officers doing exactly what you said. I am disgusted by it. To be frank, I think it needs to stop. It's not going to stop overnight, but as soon as I see it, I do put a stop to it. I rectify the situation by, if they need medical attention, they get it swift and frankly without anything happening. I take the complaints from everyone that's involved, make sure it's investigated, and deal with it correctly. It does need to stop, because it could be one time they tase another officer in the station, that taser prong could bounce off and go out the window and hit someone out on the street. You don't know where it's going to go sometimes. It does need to stop. And also, it costs the state a lot of money to replace them tongs and the taser cartridges. And also, when we get sued because a suspect's been injured in the cells for no reason other than the officers just messing around, it needs to stop, Frank, no matter what.
Perfect. Do we have any other questions in the crowd for now? Okay. I'll move on to the next prepared question. There has been a number of examples of leadership throughout our state structures in the city, whether it be San Andreas Police Department, LSPD, BCSO has remained with only one sheriff since its birth, head ranger, etc. If you had to compare yourself to any leader of any existing or historical leader that the state has seen, how would you best say the way that you plan on running your department best suits? In other words, do you see yourself more like a boss, a bidder, a Dan, a Graves, whichever? That being said, I'll open up to, let's start with Manson.
I don't think I can safely compare myself to any one leader. I think each leader has their own redeeming qualities that make them a great leader. And it's those redeeming qualities that I want to take inspiration from. I want to be open-minded and personable like Boss. I want to also be authoritative where needed and making sure that things are being done correctly and corrected in a correct manner in the same way that you did back when you were chief. But at the same time, I also want to remain as neutral and open-minded as possible similar to Dan and Bitter, and the way that they always keep an unbiased outlook and a neutral stance on everything.
Okay. Avery?
Oh gosh, it's hard to pick just one person. As far as my, I guess my influence, as far as from the moment that I was command, was Dan. Um, he was my sheriff. I was a BCSO corporal before I was anything else, and I took a lot of my leadership and the way that I handled situations from him. I will say I'm not as calm as he is. I definitely have a tendency to get a little more passionate about certain topics, um, and that definitely is a little less Dan like. But I mean, Graves, you and I have also spoken about the ways that we are similar. So I guess it's really hard to pinpoint exactly one uh, person that I hope to be as uh, or do as well of a job at as. But those two, I guess, would be my main inspirations and aspirations.
Okay. Smithy?
So I feel like I could add a piece of you all chiefs and sheriff and ranger, put it all to one, a bit of myself as well, mix it all together, and come out with the best possible plan to help the department and help the community to survive and to thrive.
Okay. Perfect. Moving on to the next question.
Bless you.
Oh, sorry. There's one in the back there. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Mr.
all right,
San
I
Diego.
got it. Regarding to what y'all were just talking about, or whatever, I really wasn't paying attention, but it kind of y'all keep talking about like ways you can like look after like what the other like past chiefs or whatever they did, but if you really think about it, the majority of the population in this city, or they're out there, so what if some of the people out there that maybe y'all have noticed that you might think about bringing into whatever your chief, if that makes any sense? Smithy?
Yeah, that's why I want to build a community liaison with the community. So I'll get people from the MCs, from the gangs, and then local leaders to sit around a table, and we'll discuss any issues they have in the city and within the force that need to be addressed, and we can sort it out, hopefully, and resolve everything.
Okay. And if you want to take over, Avery.
Sure. I definitely think community involvement is going to be big for us moving forward. I think we've all discussed a little bit how we want better relations with the community and more involvement with them. I personally would love to work on fixing some of our internal issues first, while we mend relationships and that sort of thing with the community, and then work on getting more involvement and more things working together. I just think it's a multi-step process and it won't be overnight, but I do think it's possible, and I do think it's something we should look towards.
Okay. Manson?
I think that's a very good point to bring up. Is that something that we should always be willing to listen to is the community, especially the peers around us. And the biggest thing that I think that I want to do is really take inspiration from a lot of what people are saying about us and take it to heart and really see how we can fix that. I know that we've got a negative reputation, so speaking with a lot of community members and holding something similar to this pretty often would allow us to really have that insight to change how we act and differ from how previous leaders have acted and allow us to actually listen to the community and act on it. I think a great person, as an example, would be Dr. Duke, as she is always willing to hear everybody's side of the story, regardless of who you are.
Thank
That's-
you. You're the
That's a
only one
page
that
out of her
understood
book
my
that I want to
question.
take.
Mhm. Thank you.
Okay. There's no other questions. We can go back to the pre-written ones. Okay. One of the biggest issues that anybody in power has in the state is going to be holding up and actually keeping perseverance in their goals. It's easy enough to say that, for instance, Manson wants to have conferences like this more frequently and such like that. But the hard part is not the first few, but rather maintaining the the longevity of something like that. What are your plans to make sure that programs instated don't just fizzle out and die and that they stay strong? We'll start that one off with Manson and continue to the rat.
Yeah. So I think the biggest way to do that is to have some sort of incentive within the community. Maybe have some sort of community project that we can all work on together that kind of happens and formulates through these events. Say there's a certain part of the city that needs a little bit of a fix up after some sort of event happened, right? We can at these repeating events that we go on, we can continue to talk about ways to improve not just us as the police department, but the city as a whole. And maybe we have some sort of fundraiser or something like that, and that kind of gives us that incentive to keep pushing on. It's that change in just the community, but the city as a whole that we want to be, and that's what's going to keep us going, in my opinion.
Okay, Avery.
Yeah, maybe I perceived the question a little bit differently, but the first thing I thought about when I heard that question was that officers get burned out of things very quickly. Um, I've seen it happen to a lot of officers that they undertake a big project like something like this, and it just gets overwhelming. The best thing that I think we can do to upkeep programs that we try to instate is by allowing officers who may not have as much rank but have twice the passion and allowing them to get involved. Because I see a lot of people getting shut out of things for rank, and quite frankly, it's not conducive to any sort of growth for the department. And I want to see officers that have these sort of passions that they want to pursue. I want to see them pursuing them, because I believe that that would be a benefit to the city as a whole.
Perfect. Moving on, Smithy.
So I would ask within the departments for any officer that is interested in running such schemes, such as like talking to the community, finding out what the issues are, running events for community relations. So they're dedicated to that one task only. It will be open to all ranks. So they'll be able to run that department and come to me for any assistance. So we can keep the ongoing of anything new that is started up towards the community and assisting the community.
All right, beautiful. Go ahead there. I believe that's Simba.
Yeah. My question is, what do you plan to accomplish in your first 30 days if elected?
We'll start that one off at Avery.
One of the first things that I hope to get into is officer evaluations. I've taken address to a couple of different officers that I feel like had been long overlooked within the police department, and I'm not done yet. I still think there's officers that have continually been overlooked, and it has created a lot of resentment and a lot of distrust for command and things of that nature. And I want those people that have been putting their time, effort, and energy into our city to feel like it's not all for naught, if that makes sense. So that's my biggest thing is I want to get our evaluations done. There's canon SOPs that are being rewritten as well that I hope to get through, as well as pushing for new certifications and bringing other officers in on big projects that I had in the works before I took over the interim chief role, I'd like to get those more fleshed out now that I do have the ability to do so, and bring other officers in, and kind of get people rolling on things that that they feel passionate about.
Okay. Smithy.
So I would, for a start, make sure we get a new FTO program up and running, as it's been well overdue. Get new blood into the force, get the new cadets training. It's not just about getting the new blood in, but also making sure all the officers have the correct training they need to do the job day to day. Anything they need, they can come towards me. Also, to start with the community, reaching out, starting up the new table forum with the community so we can have a discussion to see what needs to be fixed and what the issues are, so we can start putting a plan into place in the 30 days.
Okay, perfect. And then round it out with Manson.
So the first 30 days is always crucial when stepping into any new role, and I think that the biggest thing that I want to see happen is really strengthening what we have as a command and diversifying it. I think right now it's very static and it really doesn't affect much, where it should have a much greater effect on the department as a whole. We don't properly get to see what happens through the department through most of the day. A lot of our command is centered around certain shifts, and I think that's the biggest thing I want to do is really create an opportunity to spread that out. And in spreading that out, that allows us to see officers who patrol at different times, such as maybe when when I'm off duty, sleeping at home, I have officers patrolling that I don't get to see, and I don't necessarily get to know exactly what good work that they're doing, and that'll allow us to open up other opportunities for officers through lateral gain rather than through vertical movement through the ranks, as rank congestion is quite frankly one of the biggest issues that you face in a department. Allowing people to get new things in a similar way that Avery was talking about, but in a different manner. I don't think necessarily promotions are the way to progress someone's career every time, but that's currently how our current or certifications are set up, and I think that maybe needs to be taken a look at to see if we can diversify how some officers get certain certifications.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Next prepared I'm sorry, Mr. San Diego in the back.
I have another question. Yeah. I've heard Smithy talk about a lot about like, well, first let's just start by saying this. I'm only here to see what I can gain and know whatever y'all are planning next, so I can know what to plan next. If I'm being honest, and see what I can get from gaining. So that being said, I already know kind of what Smithy's gonna be doing for the community. But what about the other two candidates? What are y'all plans to help me out?
Can I start on that?
Sure, go ahead, Manson.
Yeah, so the biggest thing that I want to do for the community, which helps not only you, but every other civilian in the state, is I want to work directly with maybe with the Zona or through the DA's office, or just the judicial system as a whole. I want to work on a better system for helping to alleviate the license points that people accrue on their driver's license, whether it's through community service, cleaning up trash on the beaches, or maybe doing some volunteer work for EMS if possible, if they're willing to work with us on that. I think the biggest thing we can do is not only look to improve ourselves, but improve the lives of everyone around us. And that's the biggest thing that I want to do for the community is just help you guys get back to normal lives after what might have been a mistake and a wrong decision that you made once, and it shouldn't affect you for the rest of your life.
Okay.
And Avery?
When I think about community relations currently, the main thing that just comes to my mind is, well, first of all, building better relationships just in general. I think right now it's obviously very fractured, and I want to continue working towards just overall better relations. As far as the licensing and points go, I know there was something discussed as far as canines being used for that, which would obviously require my input. Um, as far as past that point, I'd like to see more community involvement from you guys of what you want to see from us, more input. I know we've talked about the discussion of maybe having more meetings here and things like that. I just want there to be more open discussion. I also think that the upcoming meeting that I have with one of the judges could potentially produce a better way for you guys to get things to trial when you want it to go to trial, which is a big thing that I know a lot of people have issue with, is that they can't get a trial when they need one. And I personally think that that needs to change, and that's something I hope to discuss with the judge that I have the meeting set up with.
Beautiful. All right.
I have one more question.
Okay.
If what about the cars that y'all be taking? What can we get them back at a cheaper price? Let us buy them from you.
Could you
Anything?
clarify what you mean by taking?
Well, whatever happens to the cars, you know, like, is there a way, like, for us to maybe work something out, like work like a plan or something that's
Are
for
you
y'all to figure out?
referring to like
Any
when your
cars that
cars
y'all
get
take?
impounded, or
Sure.
are you referring to like vehicle seizures?
Either one. Probably the vehicle seizures.
I mean, that would not necessarily be something that the chief would have control over. That's
I'm just
more
asking
of
questions.
yeah, that's more of a me question. As it stands, any vehicle that is seized hands over to the state, and the judges run a. Whoa, buddy! Relax
Uh-oh.
back there.
Hey,
Not Warp
bro.
Tour in
How's it
2012.
going?
Relax. Um,
Relaxing.
the vehicles that are seized are brought to an auction where they can be purchased based off of an auction. There's also been some silence auctions that have occurred. In terms of uh, the prices of your vehicle being impounded, you could always take that to court. A judge can oversee any default impound code if you'd like to contest anything.
For sure. I was just curious. Thank y'all.
Yeah, no worries. So next question that's here prepared. In terms of the last chief, that's going to be Chief Nick Smith. What is going to be your biggest gripe or disagreement or critique of his being chief? Let's start off with Smithy.
I know Chief Smith wasn't always around. As you know, I'm always normally around. If I'm not reachable, you can always get hold of me one way or another. I tend to be around a lot more, even if I do get elected as chief, just so I can keep an eye on everything, reach out to the community, reach out to the officers to see what they need as well. Just spend time speaking to everyone as the day goes on.
Okay. Manson?
My biggest gripe with the way the Smith ran the department was his reluctance to listen to opportunities of change or promotions or anything for the matter that kind of contrasted directly with what he thought. The biggest thing with that came always with changing how things are run. If we have, officers who are really working towards something and really deserve the opportunity to achieve something, then I don't see why we shouldn't give it to them. And that also came in the form of criticism sometimes, where he would openly tweet out in order to instigate not only civilians fighting amongst each other, but with the police department as a whole, openly on Twitter.
Okay, Avery?
Um, I will say I dislike the question in general. I don't like speaking ill of anyone. I genuinely believe that Smith did what he could for the state, and that he was just at a point in his career where he couldn't do what he needed to for the state. With that being said, his general disconnect from the department and from command was the biggest problem I had. One of my campaign points is transparency, because even as a command member under him, I just felt like we were not involved as we could have been, and I plan to change that. I think a lot of the problems that a lot of officers have, not just Smith, but is taking on a lot of burden on yourself. Again, when people get overwhelmed and burnt out because they haven't reached out for help, there's just not really much you can do once you hit a certain point. So I want to stop that before it happens and share the load with my command and encourage them to do the same in their own personal passion projects.
That's very noble of you, and I agree with you. The one thing I will say, and this goes for all candidates here, the question was not meant to be in any way sort of a negative attack, but more so, in order to truly advance and to better ourselves, you must be open to critiques. We are all human, we are all fallible, so do keep that in mind. Be open to critique from either your closest peers or a stranger on the street, because that is the only way you'll never be able to see your own flaws in the mirror, usually. Is there any other questions from the crowd?
Not right now, sir.
Okay, that being said, we're almost at the hour mark. So we're gonna open it up to one last pre-written question, and then we'll open it up to crowd for any final crowd questions, and then we'll move on to closing statements. In terms of you and your fellow candidates, what do you think puts you above your fellow candidates in terms of your eligibility and viability for the position? And we'll start that one out with Avery.
Personally, I have come into this department when both of the two standing next to me were already decently high rank. I came into BCSO as a cadet, very new, very inexperienced, um, and I was always open to learning more. I think that's where some people may struggle is once you reach a certain point in your career, you think that you kind of have it down, you kind of get into your rhythm. And I guess that's one of those things that I'm always willing to listen to opinions from anybody, whether it be a cadet or a civilian. I just, generally speaking, I'm always willing to hear somebody out. And I think that's one thing that puts me in a bit of a different perspective. I feel like sometimes when you've been doing this for a long time, you just kind of get a little stuck in ways. Um, and I think that that is something a little different about me is that I just have a more open mind.
Okay. Next up, we'll move on to Smithy.
I've always been kind and caring, open doored, always willing to listen, no matter what it is. If it's a complaint, someone to shout at, I'm always here. No matter who it is, if it's officers or civilians, they can always just come and have a chat to me. There's no bias or anything in that way. And if they need the help, I'll take the help and give them the assistance they need. No matter what, I will do whatever it takes to assist them to get their end goal. And like I've said before, we all make mistakes, and that's the best thing about mistakes. You can always learn from them.
Okay, and I just want to clarify: you're implying that the other candidates don't do those things.
They don't always listen.
Okay. Manson.
Firstly, ouch. I think the biggest thing that I have is experience. I've seen this department go through not one, not two, not even three, but I mean with interim Chief Avery, 4 different chiefs. I've seen the good, the bad, and the mediocre of the department, and I've seen what we've done wrong and what we've done right. And I think that experience alone gives me a certain edge to be able to correct our actions where we may stray from a good path and to be able to write our course back to being what we are meant to be, which is public servants to protect and serve.
Okay. Just to clarify, weren't you around for 5 chiefs technically?
I was not actually around for Pain. I
Really?
was about a week or two after, yeah, right before week or two before the snow,
I
right
hired
after
you?
you took off, right after you. What?
I didn't know I hired you. Okay.
Yeah, you hired me and then promoted me to officer in like a week.
Boom. All right. That being said, we'll move it off to the crowd for any final questions from the crowd. Go ahead, Simba Hogan.
My question is for Lieutenant Smithy.
Can you speak up? Sorry.
Yes, sir. My question's for you, Smithy, Lieutenant.
Yes, sir.
What is your approach to handling controversial or complicated issues?
Can you give me a context?
Issues within the department, possibly policy breaking or tough decisions. Like, what's your preparation for that? How would you prepare to make a tough decision like that?
So I'd make sure it gets investigated fully. When it's been investigated, I'll look at all the facts. If there's several officers involved, I'll make sure that all the officers get spoken to, not by just myself. But if it needs to be handed over to FIB for them to handle the case, I would always make sure that there's a couple of us that are there when they get interviewed on the situation, so there can't be any bias before a situation is dealt with swiftly and harshly in what it requires, no matter what. If it means retraining, a strike, or even a dismissal or a suspension.
Okay. Would any of the other candidates like to respond?
I think in regards to disciplinary actions within the police department, it's been very inconsistent, which is why I personally made an announcement that starting at that point, we were going full clean slate and starting over. And that way, command can kind of address things the way they need to address them. And there's no more, oh, well, so and so didn't get striked for XYZ and the other, but I'm getting in trouble for it and whatnot because we're starting over. I think we need to set a new basis for discipline and how we treat it. And moving forward, command needs to be on the same page, regardless of who wins the election.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with Avery on that one, that a clean slate is definitely needed, especially when there's been a clear bias that happens, especially when it comes to targeted reports and complaints on officers from people you shouldn't expect to do that.
Okay. Next up, any other questions from the crowd? Go ahead.
So I know Manson touched on this earlier about rank congestion and opening up certain things to maybe other officers or lesser ranks, but in the past, from what I've heard and what I've been told, is that if you're somebody, if you're somebody, for example, who's ambitious, they want to take on more responsibilities, and this is to all the candidates. In the past, if it's only been sometimes it's been seen as they just want to go up in rank, whereas do you have a tangible benefit or a tangible plan? Somebody comes to you and says, I do want to take on more responsibilities and I do eventually want to be command. Rank congestion aside, what would that tangible plan look like?
Do any of the candidates want to start?
I can. With rank congestion being an issue, I personally think we need to address inactivity more. I think a lot of our congestion just comes from just not addressing issues that need to be addressed, and that opens up spots for people who are here and who are doing what they need to be doing to progress. I don't think it's a bad thing to have high ambitions, like command. Uh, I was fully transparent with Dan when I first joined VCSO that I hoped one day to be able to be a corporal. That was my goal when I was a cadet. So from the beginning, I did have high aspirations, and it got me to where I am today. I progressed very quickly because my ambition was leadership and not rank. Um, while I did want to be command at some point, it wasn't for anything other than I wanted to get to a point where I was.
There he
There he
is.
is.
Sorry, I had to give some
Hey,
officers
guys.
a job.
There was fat people in there.
No worries.
They were standing over at that
All right,
cage, but we
back
won't
off
go
from where we started. Were we in the middle of answering a question?
Yeah, but don't ask me what the question was.
Avery was answering, but cut off halfway through.
What was the question exactly? I don't remember what the question was.
I think it was regarding rank congestion and people saying necessarily that they want rank.
Oh, okay.
I think was what we were addressing. Are we ready to start back up? I don't want to
I
answer
think
without.
majority of the people, yeah, are back.
Okay. So I don't know how much of what I'll keep it short. I'm not sure how much of what I said you guys heard. I just wanted to say that as far as rank congestion goes, there's a lot of inactivity within the LSPD that goes unaddressed, and that's something that needs to change, in my opinion. We need to open up for people that are here and putting in that time, effort, and energy for the department. And I think that will clear up a lot of the whole issue with rank congestion. As far as like wanting rank goes, I think wanting rank for just a title is very different from wanting responsibilities. And there's a way to clearly express what your ambitions are without just saying that you want rank. And I think that they're two very different things that sometimes get treated as the same. And I personally disagree with that.
Okay. Would any of the other candidates like to respond?
Sure. I think inactivity is one way to address it, but I don't think it's the end-all be-all solution. At the end of the day, the department is going to grow and more spots are going to open. In a perfect world where every officer is active, you're still going to have that issue of rank congestion unless the department is growing and you need to expand to cater to the growing roster of officers. I think the biggest thing, in my opinion, to address it would be, as I had mentioned previously, would be to diversify the shifts that we have through our command and making sure that we're properly being able to see everything at all times, not all times, but like throughout all the different shifts, and being able to address them will allow us to not only give more responsibility to officers who want it, but allow us to hold other officers who have asked for responsibility and are not putting in that effort or time, and allowing us to react with that and address it and then take care of it as needed if that results in, disciplinary action or whatever it may be.
Okay. And Smithy, did you want to say anything?
I feel there's a lot of training that can be given to officers to promote their career throughout ELSPD, and then onwards to different departments like the troopers and the rangers, and even to FIB if they want to. Depends where they want to go. I would have a sit down with the officers to discuss what their future plans are, how they feel, what they feel they can take on as a day-to-day, and organise situations for them to assist them, like doing the table meetings and also community outreach and certain programs that I have it planned. It's not just a case of getting the rank and the certs for the rank. It's about being human, realizing your mistakes, and when necessary, retrain them, and if it requires it, to give them the strike. Basically, just train them as they go along, so they can promote their career if they wish to.
All right. Are there any other questions from the crowd? Okay. If nobody else has anything, we can go ahead and move on to our closing statements. We could start it off the way we opened up. Manson, if you just want to just finish with your last few words.
Sure. I guess I'll just end it with just restating what my core values are about. I want to start off with civility, which is just how we as officers act towards not just members of the community, but towards other officers and other officials. Opportunity, which is what we've just discussed, where I want to be able to provide more opportunities to not only officers, but to civilians and other state employed officials as well, just being able to better the community as a whole. The third value I have is clarity, which comes just as the word is defined. I want to be clear with what we're doing. I don't want to hide anything. I don't want to be doing anything behind people's backs or having to make up excuses for why things are happening. We need to be clear and open with what we're doing and make sure that everybody understands what we're doing and why we're doing it. And then the final one would be kindling, which really is about rekindling the community relations that we have and other relationships with other departments and other public offices as well.
Okay, Avery.
In closing, I just want to say that I hope to improve the department as a whole, as well as improve our community relations. I want every officer to feel 100% confident in what they're doing every day. And I feel like it starts internally, and then we'll work outwards, and eventually it'll branch across the city. And that's my hope.
Perfect. And Smithy.
My closing statement is I would serve the community, the state, through the police and open door policy, assisting when needed with any situation that may pop up. My door will never be closed. That's probably about it. And at the end, I would just like to thank everyone and the other candidates all the best. And thank you for everyone for attending today.
Beautifully said. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you your 3 candidates for Chief of LSPD. If we can have a round of applause for them 3. It's been a beautiful campaign so far. All right. That being said, we are going to move on. Please make sure you grab any snacks you want off the table as you make your way out. If any of you'd like to stay and talk to the candidates, that's your prerogative. And do remember, as long as you don't have a felony, you are entitled to vote. And the voting starts Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern and will continue through Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern, with the winner being announced Saturday night after the votes have been counted in total. So thank you for attending and taking part in our democratic procedures here. And let's go for San Andreas. Have a good day, everybody.
Hey.